more humble.
So it's crazy.
I feel like the internet gave you that.
Okay, man, welcome back to another episode of the Think Successfully Room. This is a platform where we focus on building mindsets, we building character, bringing value to both you and your people. First and foremost, I am your host, QB So Effing Amazing. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you hit that bell to be notified on future content. And don't be afraid to drop a review on this content, y'all. Most importantly, man, Dr. Johnny.
Hey, QB So Effing Amazing.
Appreciate you, man.
Back, man. I think it's the
yes,
third
sir.
episode. Third episode, man.
Well, I think the second time, man, we had ended up losing the footage.
Yeah.
So we never got it to you. And then the very first time we shot, we didn't actually have audio prepared just yet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
This is the first time we got you on the
setup's nice,
platform.
man. You
Man,
guys
appreciate
upgrading. You guys are upgrading around here. It's cool to see where you've grown, man, and
Yeah.
where we started. And yeah, that second one on sleep got lost, but we got a hot topic today to talk about. You want to introduce it?
Yeah, I'm actually interested in this because it's not a topic that is most common, I guess, but it is a chapter in the book. I don't know if you want to show it for the people or whatever, but
so I mean, well, how'd you first find about this, man? Right. So this is the vaccine book. It's making the right decision for your children, and it breaks down vaccines from hepatitis B, right? Which is supposed to be the first vaccine they give you on day one for the birth, right? I just had a child last May, and that was the first thing they said is, hey, you just had this beautiful born baby. Can we jab this thing in them? Right? And it's a hot topic because whether it's vaccines or, this new book here has the COVID, it's updated from 2022. So it's about a year and a half, 2 years old now, but it does have the most recent data from at least within the last 2 years and about COVID, right? So
Right. So, man, when it comes to hepatitis B, if I'm not, like how you said, that's something they're supposed to give the baby fresh out the womb. Could you explain exactly what hepatitis B is?
That's a great question, right? So, and even with hepatitis B, let's do this first, right? Because if you guys don't know this about me, I'm a chiropractor, right? I'm a doctor of chiropractic, which means I study and work on the spine and the health of individuals, and I adjust them to help them restore proper function for them to live the healthiest, best life that they can, right?
Absolutely.
As a chiropractor, I'm not giving medications. I'm not giving drugs. I'm not giving vaccines. I'm not even giving like B shots, right? Vitamin B shots. I am at its purest form, the way that your body can heal and your body can work on a daily basis. And I think that's important to disclaim, right? Because this disclaimer is like, this book and my thoughts on vaccines or on COVID or on anything health related. Nowadays, there's so much that comes down to opinions. Is it fact or fiction? Is the government, right? We were just talking about, is it government regulated? Is it marketed towards me because, these bigger companies have enough money to market it towards me? So there's so much we're going to dive into today. And I'm excited to be here. But yeah, hepatitis B. Let's look into this, right? Hepatitis B is a virus that can infect your liver, right? There's hepatitis A, which you can get from fecal oral. Hepatitis B, I will always remember my professor in chiropractic school said B is bad, right? Because it can turn into other liver issues or liver cancers. But at its purest form, hepatitis B is an infection from a virus that gets transmitted from, let's say, blood to kid, right? Or you can say from someone who had tattoos and the ink wasn't sterilized and it tattooed someone who had hepatitis B, which then transferred to you. Or like this book talks about, from mother to child.
That's
right?
what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. And so at its purest form, hepatitis B is an infection of the liver from a virus that can lead to liver failure and ultimately long-term complications.
So let me throw this in there. Like, so the only time a child will need a hepatitis B vaccine is if the mother test positive for hepatitis B.
Right. And that's where it's at its purest form. Nowadays, when you look at, and I got my notes, I came prepared for QB So Effing Amazing here. So, because this book is dense and it's a book review on when would you want to give your kid a vaccine and when not. whether it's hepatitis B or not. And so the research showed that the most common way, right, there's STDs, there's IVs, there's needles, but most of the time when you're worried about your child, it's being passed from mother to baby and the mom's infected and it transferred to the baby. And that's really when you talk about vaccines. In that scenario, yeah, that baby's going to need a hepatitis B vaccine at birth, because what it is, what's the vaccine? You got to understand the vaccine at its truest form is it's really these immunoglobulin proteins. We all have these immunoglobulins or just IMs. Those are your antibodies, right? Your body will release these if you get in contact with any virus, any allergen, and it helps stimulate your immune system to fight it, get rid of it, so then you're still living your healthiest life. But as a baby, you're born. You don't really have those yet. You need to develop them over time.
Right. So I think I'm not even sure if you just answered that, but I was going to ask exactly how hepatitis B was created. I'm not sure if you got that in your notes, but it is something that's used to make sure hepatitis B vaccines is made.
Right. So hepatitis B, when we look at disease in general, disease at its purest form is always the way to stimulate ultimately life. Because think about this, a virus, right? Hepatitis B comes down to a virus that wants to replicate as much as it can, and then it's going to eventually kill the host. But then at that point, that virus wants to then spread and survive elsewhere. I mean, just how we as humans want to survive and live. So when you're looking at diseases and then you look at how to cure that disease, right? How do you fight off that disease? Well, our bodies have this immune system built in it to then stimulate attackers, immunoglobulins, antibodies, cells against the virus. And that's how most vaccines are made, right? They look at ways to target our immune systems, stimulate our own immune systems to then kill off the virus, the bacteria, the disease that ends up making the person sick. That's a lot to try and process, but you got to think where that starts and then where we get it.
Right. Well, that's an interesting thing, because now it's going into like what, when it comes to what problem may occur when there is, where there isn't the proper research needed behind certain vaccinations. Because I do believe that some parents steer away from vaccines because they may feel like they do not have the proper research needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think this is where, if you're listening right now, Q just asked the most important question, like, where is the research going? Because I don't know about you, but going into this topic, you start going onto Google, right? And you start typing in all this information. And we talk about where are we funneling this information from, right? Why is you can pay Google ads for you to have you want to be the best QB so effing amazing. You could pay Google thousands of dollars so that you type in podcasts and your name's the first thing to pop up there. The same thing can happen with the research that is being put out there by, let's say, certain companies. And so, that's where this book asks the right questions, right? Like I said, I just had a baby. And so when you're looking for, even me, a chiropractor who had 8 years of schooling, 4 years undergrad, 4 years chiropractic, I still ask the questions, what should I give my baby? What vaccine should I give them? Am I going to give them any, right? Is it healthy for me not to give them any and let their own bodies stimulate the health that they need over time? And so, like I said, this book's written by Dr. Robert W. Sears. He's an MD, and he started asking the same questions when he started having a baby. And it led him down this rabbit hole of making a top-selling book to help parents or even people figure out, what vaccine should I take? What should I be taking? What should I do for my health?
Well, that's why I thought I asked that question, man, is because there's no evidence that proves, the vaccines doesn't work. But there's no, but at the same time, it is some critics that would say that vaccinations is the cause of long-term problems like, ADHD, chronic fatigue, diabetes, allergies, asthma, and just learning disorders. Would you agree with those critics that certain vaccinations may have long-term effects?
This is, you might as well put this right? Because this is a hot topic, because so many people will say, well, whether we can talk about all vaccines, right? In this scenario. And so what you're first asking is, right, is it efficacy, right? Is the vaccine that people are getting helping them cure them of this disease, you know, whether it's hepatitis B, whether it's polio, whether it's rotavirus, or whether it's COVID or the flu shot, right?
Yeah.
What I want you to, number one, keep in mind, and this is something I wrote down too, that I think it's so important, because here's the honest truth, you know, Q, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, my parents gave me all the vaccines, right? Right? I mean, I think it was different back then, because it's just you do it because you trust your doctor, you trust their knowledge, you trust where it's going. But what I've seen is over the years, and this book goes into this, is the vaccine schedule has changed, where it's adding, you know, 2-3 times the amount of vaccines maybe a child needs, or like the COVID vaccine is on the CDC schedule now for that, right? But yeah, do vaccines lead to adverse side effects?
Right.
Absolutely. And that's the question. Now, does it happen 100% of the time? No. But if you look at the research, you can have cases based on the vaccine, either 1 in every 1,000 or 1 every 5,000. And think about that. There are millions and millions of kids born a year.
Facts.
It's actually, I'd look this up. So babies per year, there's 3,605,000 babies born per year on average. And so 1 out of every 10,000 babies can get a vaccine and have an adverse reaction. Well, that happened from that vaccine. And yeah, maybe it is doing its job. Maybe it is protecting that baby from meningitis, pertussis, but that's a huge topic for parents that say, hey, well, I'm not going to give my baby this vaccine because I'm worried it's going to lead to they're autistic. They have ADHD. They develop longer issues and longer problems.
Because I also feel, and I think the book goes into this, that I think it's important for parents to, you know, for one, if you don't have the vaccine book and you're a parent, it's a must to have, because a lot of times, you know, I think it'll be very important for a parent to know the different vaccines and exactly what that means, because if I'm not mistaken, the book mentions that a doctor will give you whatever is on that schedule, because at the same time, they do get compensated for making sure that their patients are vaccinated.
That? Yeah, you saw that, right? So it'd be an interesting question to ask your doctor. You know, let's say you have a baby, right? And you go their 3-month checkup after they get a few doses. If you ask your doctor, hey, do you get paid extra? And you don't want to disrespect the doctor, but and I've had, you know, Dr. Jared, he's the owner of my clinic, and we talk about this, and he has said, like, he'll ask the doctors, because he wants to question their certainty, do you get stipend? Do you get paid? Do you get bonus off of how many vaccines you give in a year? And the book shows that actually does happen.
Yeah. So it's like, now you got a question, like, is your doctor really giving you these vaccinations, whether we're talking about child or adult? Are you receiving these vaccinations because they really have your best interests at heart, or are you just getting these whatever vaccinations are scheduled because they're getting compensated for it?
Right, because they get compensated, because it's the norm, right? Kind of like you and I, like, oh, it's just the norm. Are they being pushed to do it more so because of ridicule or judgment from other doctors or other interest groups? And here's what's cool. Like, I wanted to mention this too, because you and I got these vaccines when, you know, we're kids, right? But here, if you read this in the book, it talks about vaccines only being good for, let's say, 10 to 15 years. So if you and I, like, let's say polio, right? I mean, I can't tell you the last time I got a polio vaccine, maybe when I was 2. But that's already run, like, that's no longer efficient in our body, right? So we get, let's say we go to a part of the country or the world, because polio is not active around here. I mean, that's the God's honest truth. And that's why I like this book, because it goes through, is this virus or disease common? Is it serious? And is it treatable, right? And it goes through that book. Well, if you go into certain areas where maybe one virus is more populated and more presence, well, they might say, yeah, you have to get an inoculation. You got to get a booster for polio, because you're going to a country that has more cases of polio, because that vaccine that you got when you were 2 is no longer effective. And I don't think people think about that. Maybe they think about it with COVID or the flu shot, because those viruses are so common and they mutate each season. And the book talked about COVID replicates and changes every 4 to 8 months, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so during that, I think it was 6 to 12 months, if I'm being honest. I think the flu is a little bit faster. The flu can mutate at a faster rate than coronavirus. But that's the thing. You're trying to play catch up with Mother Nature, with this virology, and we'll never be able to play catch up. It's just crazy.
That's actually my next question was the whole COVID
Yeah,
thing.
we can jump into that. I'm down.
Yeah, so was when it came to COVID-19, now at a point you had to get vaccinated to travel. Or certain, even if you weren't traveling, you might have been in a certain workforce that caused you to have a vaccination.
Yeah.
My thing was the vaccination really helping, or was it more of a financial gain for going back to the government organization?
Yeah. I mean, this is where so as a chiropractor, right, I had clients coming into me, and this was in 2020, 2021. They're wearing masks, right? We're all masked up. And they're coming to me saying, Dr. Johnny, I'm going to lose my job if I do not get this vaccine. They're literally saying that I'm going to get fired, which you think back to it. And they use this language a lot. It's called an EUA, when it's emergency use authorization. So what's that mean, right? So that means that they are able to push vaccines because of a scare of how, let's say, transmissible or how deadly disease or virus could be, that it doesn't need testing, right? So it's an EUA vaccine. And when it first came out, people were pressured to do that because they thought that was going to be the cure-all, right? They thought the whole goal was to decrease transmission, decrease infection, right? To lower the wave, lower the tide. And even with the increased vaccinations, the virus was so transmissible that people were getting vaccinated and still passing it, which is wild.
Yeah, so the whole COVID-19 thing it was kind of like, man, is it? Because I always questioned that. I was kind of one of the guys. I'm like, man, they not sticking me with nothing, man. I'm not going to get no vaccine just because not only did, before I read the book, I already felt like it was a financial scheme. It was money involved. And then I even heard stories of not only was people getting sick, but I heard somebody say after they got a vaccine was, they had quarters and shit sticking to them. You know what I'm saying? The book don't go into that, but it was
no, there are some crazy stories out there with that. And that's where when you talk to me about this topic, there's so much that, is it, I hate to say it, is it fake news? Is it people using different media sources to try and put their own scheme on it? But, this is what I love about this doctor in this book, because he says, when you talk about COVID, everyone was impacted. Everyone. It had the highest infection rate. It was the first pandemic that we've lived in our generation, me and you. But, he talks about this. This is about what families can do now to make an educational decision about COVID vaccines and things moving forward, right? Not 2020, not 2021. We have enough research now and time and evidence and more things that have come up that shows, hey, this is going to be given to your kids if you don't think about it. Sure, you can take it, but there's not long-term studies done on this.
That's what I'm saying.
If we want to get into the, okay, if I give this to my kid, right? They show in young men, me and you, right? It was the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I don't know if you caught this part or not.
No, I didn't.
So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which the CDC, the government-regulated CDC, doesn't even say take the Johnson & Johnson one. They actually recommend the mRNA virus now as a vaccine, because the Johnson & Johnson one was having more side effects in young men and young adults, leading to pericarditis and myocarditis, specifically in teenagers and young adults, meaning the muscle. So in about 1 in 10,000 cases had this happen. And that's where you look into the VARs, right? The vaccine adverse effects. That's where it gets reported. But I couldn't help but think the past few years I saw more we see 1,500 clients a week, the staff, and I saw more unique cases of people talking about young men dying of heart failure, having heart attacks, having young athletes dying on the basketball courts. And it was scary to think like, so they pushed this vaccine and all these people took it, not knowing the side effects.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you think like if it's 1 in 10,000 and we have, let's say half of the country's young males, let's say up 25%, then yeah, that could impact it. Statistically speaking, it could impact it, which is scary because you don't know. Can I trust what I'm going to take or not? That's why you got to educate yourself. You got to educate yourself.
And that's the thing, man, is that like, and by us having this discussion, I'm not saying it's going to happen to everybody. That's why you were saying 1 in every 10,000.
Right.
But it is a possibility. Like, I just want people to be informed, as you mentioned, that there is no long-term studies done on these vaccines, right?
Nope.
So when you go and you agree to a vaccination schedule, and let's just say you giving your child every single vaccine that the doctor says they need, right? Keep in mind that the doctor is being compensated for that schedule on top of just consider that those vaccinations does not have long-term studies done as well. So it's a possibility that your child could, be diagnosed with problems later on down the line.
Absolutely. And that's where I think, if we're talking just the COVID vaccine, I think that's where the society is recognizing that. And even doctors can admit that. I mean, he says it in this book, but interesting enough, the COVID vaccine is the most reactive. There's more reactive side effects than any other vaccine that's out there. 50% in men and then 33% in women from just like a statistical standpoint. Not that 50% of the time they'll get affected, but they just show the reaction rates. And so when I heard that too, I was like, wow, out of all the studies, that is the truest, most reactive adverse side effect is the COVID vaccine.
I'm not sure if you got that listed or not, but what is some of the side effects that vaccine was given?
Look, I got you. So let's say because when you hear side effects, your brain could go super hard or super soft, right? Some of the side effects are fatigue, fatigue, body aches, brain fog. They talked about some nausea or bruising. Sure, like you can get that with almost any shot because that's your body stimulating an immune response, right? But then when you talk about, let's say, not just side effects, but like adverse side effects, one of them, which to my surprise as a chiropractor, was that its effect on the nervous system. This was they talked about transverse myelitis, right? Which just means it's an inflammation response along your spinal cord, which it's going to then affect your neurology. They talked about nerve palsy, right? Like Bell's palsy, like the nerves in your face literally don't function. So then this side of your face was drooping. And then they also talked about the other big one was anaphylactic allergic reactions was 10 times more common in the COVID vaccine, which was about 1 out of every 100,000 doses. But that's still like, so think about that. Okay, 1 out of 100,000. That is 10 times more common with the COVID vaccine than with any other vaccine that's ever been produced or used. So even though you think, okay, the number's small, but it's 10 times more reactive. So, and that's just the mRNA one. They talked about blood clots, which I just mentioned in the Johnson & Johnson, which the CDC doesn't recommend anymore, which is wild.
Wow. Man, I just want to throw this out here, man. Like, this was a very, very informative episode. Very important episode because I want people to understand how serious it is when following those vaccine schedules.
Yeah.
And again, if you don't have the vaccine book, I'm not sure if they can find that on Amazon.
Yeah, you know what? I listened to the first chapter on Audible. It's on Amazon. It's on Audible. And like I said, man, come if you have more questions about health and what to do and where to go, please come to Chiropractic First or Rockford, man. Come to Quatavian, ask him. Come to QB So Effing Amazing. Listen to his podcast because he's continuing to set the standard for impacting his community, not just with money or with media, but with health and lifestyle and prosperity for all people. And that's why I love coming on your show, man.
Man, appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, of course.
Man, appreciate you, bro. Man, before we wrap it up, is it any more important, like another important fact that you can add in there before we close out?
what I want to say, if I can close with this, right? When I think about the way health and society is going, I think the last thing is understanding the health freedoms, right? Like your health, your life is important, but you have to make it a freedom, meaning take back your health into your own stands. Don't just listen blindly to what society or media or anyone will say. I
Facts.
think no matter what the topic, whether it's COVID, vaccines, financial decisions, life, mortgages, you have to, in this day and age, there's so much information out there that you have to take back the knowledge. And I think as a chiropractor, as an influencer, it is our job to do that on a daily basis. And the key is to continue to get better, and continue to educate yourself. Because if you're not learning, you're just following, and you want to be leading in this day and age.
Facts. I want to add to that also, is before we close out, man, is that I want y'all to understand that everything around us is a business. Everything around us that's being offered or injected into us is being, they're profiting from that. And I'm not saying everything is bad, but just keep in mind that, again, just piggybacking off of what Dr. Johnny just said, you can't listen to everything that's being told to you. You know what I'm saying? If something doesn't sound right, do further research, and then you adjust or make your decisions accordingly, man. And that's most important. Again, man, Dr. Johnny, man,
My God.
Appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Q.
Man, you want to say something else, man?
No,
visit my guy at chiropractic of Rockford, right on Perryville, Rockford, Illinois, man.
That's right.
Man, make sure y'all subscribe to the channel. Again, hit that bell to be notified when future content drop. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to drop a review in the comments. It'll help. It'll help with as far as improving the content going further in the future, man. So appreciate y'all. So without that being said, life is good. Life is wonderful. Be blessed to be alive. Self-sufficiency is how you survive. To the kings and queens, to the guys and goddess, forever and always. Dr. Johnny, man. Think successfully. Yeah.